What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I will be talking about Auburn finally hiring their new coach in Hugh Freeze. Yes, my favorite team's arch rival has found their new head coach. Roll Tide roll. But before I talk about the details and my opinion on it, I just want to say thank you for clicking on this video. Please consider subscribing. I make college football content on the daily. I talk about Heisman, predictions, top 25, and it's the season for highlights to start coming. So if you love college football, you'll love my channel. But let's get into it. So yesterday, November 28th, Auburn hired Hugh Freeze. Not even a month ago on Halloween, Auburn fired their previous coach, Brian Harsin. After only, a year and a half? Former Auburn running back Cadillac Williams has served as Auburn's interim head coach during the coaching search. But they hired Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze has been serving as the head coach of Liberty since 2019 and used to be the Ole Miss head coach from 2012 to 2016. Hugh Freeze was pretty successful at Ole Miss. He had a win percentage of .609, a 10-win season in 2015, and most notably, 2 back-to-back wins against the GOAT, Nick Saban, in 2014 and 2015. Although with that success, he never won the conference or even his division. At Liberty, he had a win percentage of .694, including a 10-1 season in 2020. This past year at Liberty, he went 8-4. But while going 8-4, he did get a win over Arkansas, an SEC team with a group of 5 team. Arkansas, a team Auburn lost to at home this season. Although with all this success comes a huge flaw in the fact that Hugh Freeze has a very long list of poor character and NCAA violations. Let's start off with the fact he was caught paying players and recruits. Now, a lot of this took place under previous Ole Miss head coach Houston Nutt. But Freeze's administration did it too. Freeze does not get a pass for this. His administration absolutely did it too. At Ole Miss, he was caught paying recruits and players. Lermy Tunsil, former Ole Miss offensive lineman, admitted it. And they have vacated wins because of that. They even vacated the 2014 Alabama upset that Ole Miss had. So yes, he was caught paying players while at Ole Miss. And then at Ole Miss, this is the thing that most people know. This is the thing that led to his firing. He used school phones to call escorts. Yes, he used university phones to call escorts. I know he was a married man at the time. I don't know if he's still married or what that situation is looking like, but I know it was a big affair. It was very bad, and it ultimately led to his firing as he used the school phones multiple times to call escort services. But also, and do not overlook this, he has a long history of just being incredibly weird around women and children. There is a story, I believe, I don't remember where it happened, so take this with a grain of salt. Though it's out there, you can research it. I'll leave a link in the description. But I know there's an incident involving an 8-year-old girl where she had a Grateful Dead t-shirt on, I believe, and he forced her to take it off in front of her. Again, very, very weird. And then there's a huge, I believe it's a lawsuit or it's an accusation that he has DM'd sexual assault survivors and intimidated them into not coming forward. On top of this, he has been a big defender of the former Baylor athletic director, calling him a Jesus-like man. And if you know anything about the Baylor and what happened at Baylor, I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but you can look it up. You know that's not a great thing to say. So long list of just incredibly weird and just terrible behavior. I know many Auburn fans are upset with this hire, especially Auburn women, since the university promotes strong family. But Hugh Freeze did get the hire, and he signed a 6-year, $6.5 million a year contract with Auburn. 6-year contract, he'll be earning about $6.5 million a year. As there's some rumors, it's not confirmed, he denied it, but there are some rumors as part of the contract, Hugh Freeze has given up control of his Twitter account, which I think is interesting. And Cadillac Williams has stepped down and been named assistant head coach. Whatever that means. But he's still going to be on the staff. Of course, Cadillac loves Auburn. Hugh Freeze had his introductory press conference today on November the 29th. In paraphrasing here, but he said, "I'm good friends with Coach Saban and Miss Terry, but I hope they're nervous today." And that's what he had to say about Nick Saban in Alabama. Well, and there's also some rumors that, I'm not going to recap it here because it's not that video, but there's been a lot of drama on Twitter, on the internet in the past couple days and weeks that Auburn really wanted Lane Kiffin. There's some reports that came out. Lane Kiffin denied it, but there were reports for a while. It was reported by CBS for about 10 minutes before they deleted the tweet. But there were some strong reports that Auburn was going to hire Lane Kiffin. And there are rumors still circulating that Lane Kiffin was Auburn's number one option and that Hugh Freeze was option B. But now let's get into my thoughts on the decision. I think this is a bad decision by Auburn. And I'm not saying that just because I hate Auburn, just because I want them to make bad decisions. No, I genuinely do think it's a bad decision. I can see why it was made, though. Let's start off with the fact that Hugh Freeze really isn't much better than Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn, of course, being the current UCF head coach and the former Auburn head coach from 2013 to 2019. And the fact that they're still paying Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn had a huge buyout, and Auburn is still paying Gus Malzahn. I'm going to put a graphic up on screen. Credit to Saturday Down South. Great account and great website for making this graphic. But let's compare Gus and Hugh Freeze. Gus has a better overall record. Gus Malzahn has a better record versus SEC teams. Gus Malzahn did not have a losing season. Freeze has a losing season. Gus Malzahn has 6 9-win seasons. Hugh Freeze has 4. Gus Malzahn won his division twice. Hugh Freeze never won his division while in the SEC. Gus went to a national championship in 2013, and they lost to Auburn. They lost to Georgia, in 2017, but he was very close to making the playoffs in 2017. Hugh Freeze has never really even sniffed a playoff. And Gus Malzahn is 3-5 versus Nick Saban, and Hugh Freeze is 2-3 versus Nick Saban. Now, Hugh Freeze is a good football coach, though. I'll admit that. You don't get back-to-back wins versus the GOAT Saban by luck, obviously. But he isn't that much better than Gus Malzahn. Combined with that fact, and then combined with the off-the-field stuff that is just terrible, I think this is overall a bad hire by Auburn. And I think the only thing they looked past the NCAA violations. They looked back his horrendous off-the-field issues. They looked past the fact he never won a division and the fact he only had one 10-win season. No. They looked at the fact he beat Nick Saban twice. Now, it was only 2 out of 5, but that's better than 3 out of 8. That's a better percentage. So they looked at the fact that Hugh Freeze beat Alabama twice, and I'll give Hugh Freeze credit. In 2016, Hugh Freeze had Alabama in hell for 3 quarters. Alabama ended up making a comeback to win by around 6 points, a 1-possession game in 2016. So Auburn solely looked at the fact that Hugh Freeze was very successful against Nick Saban for a certain amount of time, and that overpowered everything else. And that tells you where Auburn is right now. They want to beat Alabama. I know that's saying the obvious, but they're overlooking so much red flags in this hire just for the fact that this coach has a good track record against Nick Saban. Excuse me. But I will say, for the future, looking towards the future, Auburn is one of the most strictest programs in the country. I mean, coaches do not last too long there. Brian Harsin, you see, Brian Harsin was a bad coach, but a year and a half, and that was it. Excuse me. And then you look at Gus Malzahn, a guy who won the West twice, a guy who won the SEC once, a guy who beat Nick Saban 3 times, a guy who went to a national championship, and they fired him. I mean, it's just, they're very, very strict when it comes to their coaching. If you cannot beat Alabama and Georgia on a consistent basis, they will get rid of you. And a lot of it comes down to their boosters. I have never seen a program quite like Auburn where boosters control the program. There's boosters for every university, of course, especially the big ones, but they have such a stronghold, just a hold over the university and its decisions. And I'll say, I think, and looking towards the first 2 years, giving them 2 years, unlike Harsin, looking towards the first 2 years, he will have 2 games each versus Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. Auburn's 3 biggest rivals, Alabama, Georgia, LSU. 2 games each. So that's 6 games. If he goes 0-6 in those games, I think he's out. I think he's out after 2 years if he goes 0-6 versus Alabama, Georgia, LSU in his first 2 years. I don't care if he wins every single game. But if he goes 9-3 first 2 years with Alabama, Georgia, LSU, I truly think the guy could be out. Because that's really what Auburn's looking at. And if it wasn't what Auburn is just looking at, Auburn would have kept Gus Malzahn. That's the truth of it. Auburn would have kept Gus Malzahn because it wasn't like Gus Malzahn was having losing seasons. It's not like Gus Malzahn had a ton of off-the-field issues. No, the problem with Gus Malzahn is he was a good coach, not a great coach, but a good coach. But he could not beat Alabama on a consistent basis. He beat them once every 2 to 3 years, and that's not enough for Auburn. He didn't beat Georgia enough on a consistent basis. He didn't beat LSU enough on a consistent basis. And that is what Auburn is looking for. So do not be surprised if in 2 to 3 years, if he doesn't have a win versus Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, he could be out of there. I truly think, and it sounds crazy to think a coach who goes 9-3 and in both of his 2 to 3 years will be out, but I truly think he could. I mean, the boosters are so tight and they flip so heavily on a coach. I mean, look at Brian Harsin. Brian Harsin, you look last year, excuse me, 2021, there was a point in the season where Auburn only had 1 loss. They were sitting at, don't quote me on this, but they were sitting at about 6-1. There's a point in that season where there was 6-1 and Auburn's future looked good, and then they lost. They lost those last remaining games. They lost to Georgia. They lost to Alabama. And they lost in their bowl game, I believe, to Houston last year. So his poor finish. And boom, you see that offseason. Stories about an affair. Stories about boosters don't like him. Ton of players transferring. A ton of coaches moving. It does not take long for things to go south at Auburn, is all I'm saying. So how long will Hugh Freeze last? It's anybody's guess. I don't know the future. But I will say he better get recruits. He better start recruiting fast. And he better get a signature win in his first 2 years. Whether that be Alabama, Georgia, or LSU. Because God knows he plays in the toughest division in football. I mean, just look at it. Alabama, best coach ever. Nick Saban. Georgia, Kirby Smart. Coaching on the rise. Georgia, I think, is going to win back-to-back this year. You got back-to-back national champion right there. Then LSU, Brian Kelly's doing great in his first year. Won the West. I mean, you got so many good teams. Plus Jimbo Fisher with the number 1 recruiting class. I know Texas A&M didn't have a good year. Number 1 recruiting class. One of the highest paid coaches in college football. Plus Ole Miss and Mississippi State in that division, which are solid teams. To me, both top 25 teams. You look at that. he is going to have a weight on his shoulders. And that's what I have to say about that. I just wanted to go on a rant about that. But what do you think about the hire? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it'll work out for Auburn? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I value you guys' opinion. Thank you for watching, and peace out.